Hello, students! Welcome! Today, we are going to dive into a very interesting and fundamental question. A question about how our country, India, is actually run.
So, have you ever stopped and thought about it? How does a country as huge and as diverse as India, with all our different languages, our cultures, our religions, how does it all get governed so effectively? Well, the secret, the answer, lies in a very special system of sharing power. It's all written right there in our Constitution, and that's exactly what we are going to explore today.
So here's our plan for today. We'll start with the basic framework of federalism. Then we will look at the different tiers of government in India. After that, we'll get into the most important part, the three legislative lists that divide the powers. We'll also see how this whole system is protected, and finally, we'll do a quick recap with some tips for your exams.
Right then, let's begin with our first topic, the federal framework. You can think of this as the basic blueprint that allows a country as wonderfully diverse as ours to stay strong and united. So what does this big word federalism actually mean? It's quite simple, really. It's just a system where power is not concentrated in one place. Instead, it is divided. It's shared between a central authority, which we call the union government, and the various state governments.
Now here is a very interesting fact. If you read our Constitution, you will not find the word federation. Instead, Article 1 says that India is a union of states. But even though the word is different, the way our country is structured, the principles it is based on, are completely federal.
And this was not an accident. This was a very thoughtful choice made by the leaders who wrote our Constitution. You see, they had just witnessed the painful partition of the country, so their main goal was to build a very strong, united India. But they also wanted to make sure that the diversity of all the regions was respected, so this system was the perfect solution.
Generally speaking, there are two types of federations. First, there's the coming together type, where independent states decide to join and form a bigger country. Think of the USA or Australia. But then there's the holding together type. This is where a large country like India or Spain decides to divide its powers between the national government and the states for better administration. India is a perfect example of a holding together federation, and this is why our central government is a little more powerful to hold everyone together. So, we know that power is divided. But between whom is it divided? This brings us to the different levels, or what we call tiers of government in India. When the Constitution was first written, it created a two-tier system. At the very top, you have the union government in Delhi, which takes care of issues that concern the entire nation. And then you have the different state governments, which look after the administration of their own respective states.
But India is so vast that even states are very big. To bring governance even closer to the common person, a third tier was added later on. This is our local government. You see this in the form of panchayats in our villages and municipalities in our towns and cities. This takes democracy right down to the grassroots level.
Now we come to what is perhaps the most important part of this whole chapter. How do we decide which government will make laws on which subject? How does everyone know what their responsibilities are? Well, the makers of our Constitution made this very, very clear. They provided a threefold distribution of all the powers. Everything is neatly written down in three separate lists, so there is no room for any confusion. Okay, first up is the Union List. This list contains all the subjects of national importance, things that require one single uniform policy for the entire country. For example, defense, banking, currency, foreign affairs, these are all on the Union List. And on these subjects, only the union government can make laws. It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Next, we have the State List. This contains subjects that are important for a particular state or locality. For example, police, trade, agriculture, irrigation. These matters are best handled by the state governments themselves because they understand the local needs better. So only the state governments can make laws on these subjects. And finally, we have the third list, called the Concurrent List. Now, this is interesting. It contains subjects that are of common interest to both the union government and the state governments. Things like education, forests, marriage, adoption. Both governments have a stake in these. So for subjects on this list, both the union and the state governments can make laws.
But here's a very important question. What happens if their laws conflict with each other? What if the union government makes one law and the state government makes another law on the same subject? Now listen carefully, children. This is a very, very crucial point, especially for your exams. In case of a conflict, the law made by the union government is the one that will be followed. It will prevail. Always remember that.
This table here is a wonderful summary of everything we just discussed. It's a great tool for revision. You can clearly see the three lists, some key examples for each, and who has the power to make the laws. Make a note of this. But this brings up another interesting question. Our Constitution was written a long time ago, in 1950. The world has changed so much since then. What about new subjects that nobody had even thought of back then? Things like computer software or cyber laws. Who makes laws on those? Well, the Constitution has an answer for that too. These new subjects are called residuary subjects. And it is clearly mentioned that on any subject that is not in any of the three lists, the union government will have the power to make the laws. So, we have this beautifully designed system for sharing power. But how do we make sure that this system is protected? How can we be sure that one government doesn't just change the rules to get more power?
Well, our Constitution makes it extremely difficult to change this basic structure. For any such change, it must first be passed by both houses of Parliament, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, with a special majority of at least 2/3. But wait, that's not all. After that, it must also be approved by the legislative assemblies of at least half of all the states in India. This way, no single government can change the system alone.
And what if there is a disagreement? What happens if the union government and a state government have a dispute over the division of powers? Well, in that situation, our judiciary, the High Courts and the Supreme Court steps in. It acts just like an umpire in a cricket match. It looks at the rule book, which is our Constitution, and gives the final decision.
Now, let me clear a very common doubt that I'm sure many of you have. We just learned that agriculture is a subject on the state list. So why does the union government in Delhi have a minister of agriculture? That's a very good question. The answer is all about coordination and policymaking. While the day-to-day work and implementation of agricultural laws is with the states, the Union Agriculture Minister helps in creating a broad national policy. They help in coordinating between different states, providing financial support, and ensuring that we meet our national goals in agriculture. Phew, we have covered quite a bit today, haven't we? So let's take a moment to quickly go over the most important points to make sure you remember everything. Okay, so here are the main things to remember. First, India is a holding together federation. Second, power is shared between three tiers of government: union, state, and local. Third, this division of power is clearly laid out in the three lists: union, state, and concurrent. And finally, this whole federal structure is protected by the Constitution, with our independent judiciary acting as its guardian.
And last but not the least, a very important tip for your exams. Whenever you get a question about Indian federalism, please make sure you always mention the three legislative lists. And you must also mention the constitutional safeguards, like the difficult amendment process and the role of the judiciary as an umpire. These points are the heart of the topic, and writing about them will surely get you very good marks.